Meanwhile, a little-known army commander named Mohammed Siad Barre was becoming influential.
Siad Barre, I think, with all certainty I can say, felt that he was the reincarnation of Muhammad Abdullah Hassan. Absolute reincarnation.
More elections took place in 1968, won by Soomaaliya, an almost unique instance of a constitutional change of power in post-colonial Africa. It could not last. In 1969, President Soomaaliya went on a mercy mission to the northeast. He never returned.
When a head of state is assassinated, it is very rare that there is not a political motive or a political explanation, but it may be well below the surface. It may be obscured because of the interests of the parties or the importance of the parties concerned. It's easy to believe the current story that a demented soldier made a decision unrelated to political reality for personal or local reasons. But of course, we live in a period now when archives are being opened, and there is little doubt in my mind that the opening, for example, of the KGB archives will reveal a greater depth to these issues, and may throw some light in what historians have suspected was an implication, an involvement in Siad Barre's coup d'etat. It has been mentioned as a possibility by several writers, but no one as to date has produced the hard evidence. But that may now be possible.
A few days later, on the 21st of October 1969, Radio Mogadishu announced that Major General Siad Barre had staged an allegedly bloodless coup. Relentlessly making decisions, he quickly consolidated his position. Proclaiming himself president, he abolished the National Assembly and personally headed an appointed 25-member Supreme Revolutionary Council. Initially, the people supported him. Born in the Ogaden, he was an anti-colonialist. Many who hadn't supported the coup were detained, including then-Colonel Mohammed Farah Aidid, who had always distrusted Barre.
General Aidid and Siad Barre were in the army together. And even before he came to power, they were not on good terms. When he came to power, the first instructions he gave was that Aidid should be appointed a consular in the Somali embassy in Khartoum. That was 2 weeks after Siad Barre came to power. General Aidid refused. And within 2 weeks, again, he was put in jail. And he remained in jail for 6 years. So there was no love lost between the two.
Attempting to do away with clan ties, he appointed people on merit, not clan affiliation. It was a refreshing break with tradition, but it would not last. Barre, then gaining aid by cleverly setting superpower against superpower, was trying to turn Somalia into a modern state. While the Russians provided arms and advisors, Chinese money and loaned workers built roads into the interior and along the coast, linking towns that had never before been easily accessible. His scientific socialism was not dogmatic and instilled a feeling of optimism. His limited nationalization was also initially unauthoritarian.
I believe that Siad Barre never bothered to read what scientific socialism was. He never bothered to read what Lenin said, what Marx said, but he believed that to get something out of the Russians, you have to proclaim that you are a socialist, that you are a communist, and it is the only reasoning that the Russian power accepted.
In this hectic era, new government buildings were put up. Factories were built, producing products as diverse as tiles, processed fish, pasta, cigarettes and matches. The fertile fishing grounds were exploited for export. Traditional exports of Somali livestock went to the Arabian Gulf countries and the rest of Africa, in demand because they were disease-free and naturally produced. Tourism was encouraged along the second longest coast of Africa. Mogadishu had stunning hotels built and safari trips exploited with varied wildlife. Barre also refused to listen to experts who said that things could not be done. The fertile area between the Juba and the Shabelle rivers was being overrun by sand dunes. Undaunted, Barre created a task force of civil engineers and workers who, aided by volunteers on the weekly day off, Friday, stopped the dunes' advance by planting local cacti and shrubs. It was an unqualified success. Things were going very much Siad Barre's way. In 1974, he became chairman of the Organization of African Unity, hosting meetings of African heads of states. Having traditionally close ties with Arabia, it was no surprise when he took Somalia into the Arab League. Barre's prestige and international reputation soared. Even in the West, he was admired as a pragmatist, influenced by the Soviets, but not engulfed by them. The Soviets, though, were still anxious to consolidate their gains, and wary of ongoing Western construction projects, the Americans in Ethiopia and a growing Chinese influence signed a treaty of friendship and cooperation with Barre in 1974. Over the next 3 years, they sent an estimated $345 million in military support alone. The former colonialism was now replaced by a superpower domination. One of the biggest problems Somalia faced was education. Outside the main towns, only 5% were literate. Stories and facts had always passed verbally from generation to generation, the Somali language having no alphabet.
It took the force of a military government, Siad Barre's regime, and this is one of his positive achievements, to settle this and make a decision. And the Roman alphabet was accepted. The Saudis didn't like it.
Barre's other great skill involved the coexistence of Islam and Italian-inspired Roman Catholicism within a supposedly atheist Marxist-Leninist state. Barre, a chain-smoking insomniac, was now running the government as a personal enterprise, and resentment was building up. However, with an economy relying for the most part on aid rather than adequate production, it began to flounder. Corruption was rife. Tax avoidance a national sport. An unofficial clan-based cash economy bypassed the financial institutions, emptying the government's coffers. Now, with the country rallying behind him, Siad Barre had to look for more ambitious plans to foster his power gains and further attempt to go down in history as father of the Somali nation. One belief that would always unite the race was that ethnic Somalis in the neighbouring Ethiopia and Kenya should be reunited with Somalia. Secretly, he started training a rebel movement, the Western Somali Liberation Front, within the disputed areas. At first, the clandestine aggression went well. Emboldened by the fact that the pro-Western Emperor Haile Selassie had been deposed, Barre launched a full-scale attack on Ethiopia in July 1977.
I personally, at the time when asked, advised the Somali government not to intervene in the Ogaden. Privately, the Somali government recognized they had made a mistake when the Americans and the Russians and their sycophants, the Cubans, and even in those days some of the Yemen regimes appeared to turn on the Somalis, even though the Somalis were very confident of the moral superiority of their position.